for approval of the Minor subdivision of property located at 600 Mill Creek Drive. And I don't see any of the mix here, so.
No, that's okay. Go for it.
All right.
Sorry, Corey.
So, hello. Are we on?
It doesn't sound, there we go.
There it is.
Okay.
How about this? Not yet.
I have to be closer.
Closer. Almost here.
Yeah,
Oh,
that works.
there's something. Okay. So, to introduce our first resolution for the Minor subdivision. Introducing property owner Dan Mick and then applicants Richard Mick and Dan Mick. How about this? Better? Almost.
I turned that one so you don't have so much of a.
Sounds good.
Okay, good.
Okay. At 600 East Mill Creek Drive. So a little bit of background about the subdivision. It was submitted on July 19th. The pre-application meeting request form was submitted to the city. On August 20th, Set Engineering responded with the comments provided by the DRTE. This draft showing the transfers of property between the city as a part of City Rotary Park and Dan Mick. On October, the city signed the quitclaim deed transferring the city property to Dan Mick and Dan Mick transferring property to the city. At this time, the Minor subdivision application was submitted for review by the Moab City Plan Commission. Project summary with the subdivision that splits one parcel at 3.44 acres into two. The intent of the property owner is to maintain Lot 1 at 3.08 acres for property owner Dan Mick and allocate Lot 2 at 0.36 acres to property owner Richard Mick for a single household dwelling with shared driveway. There's a shared access and utility easement across Lot 1 and a portion of Lot 2 that allows driveway access to be used by both property owners and water and sewer lines to reach the public service. So on the map presented, a majority of the parcel on the left-hand side is Lot 1, and then the smaller flag lot on the right is Lot 2, where that driveway access to the right-of-way is at the top right of the parcel, and that access and utility easement running through the center of Lot 1. This is in the R2 single household and two household residential zone, and that is a basic summary if we discuss further.
I just want to explain a little bit about the whole easement thing. So many years ago, there was discussion between David Olson and Dan Mick about trading some property because it had to do with where the actual, like where the fences are and where the little rock wall was and all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of discussion. It was like, yeah, we should make this exchange so that you own what you think you own and we own what we think we own. And that never got recorded. We don't know exactly why, but it didn't. So the city council basically had to redo that, and they did that last month. So that's what that's about. It doesn't really concern the planning commission, the subdivision, but it had to be done before we move forward with the subdivision. So that step has been completed.
And you guys know where this property is? Down there off Rotary Park. Okay. Any discussion or questions?
Is that the floodplain shown, that line of the bottom?
Yes.
Correct.
And they will, before they start construction on their house, and they may already have it, they have to have a flood certificate and approval from our floodplain administrator, who is Chuck Williams, the city engineer. So yes, they will need to stay out of that completely, which they haven't been doing a great job at. So we're going to make sure that they stay out of that area and remove anything that's already in that area.
So the big garage that Dan built a couple years ago, is that right there on the edge of the access? Do you know?
Yes, so it's to the left of what that Lot 2 is showing and
Right.
below that access
Oh,
easement.
low. Okay.
So I have a question or comment, and I'm not sure, maybe this isn't the time to bring it up. So this is gonna be an R2 zone.
It already
It
is.
already is R2,
Mhm.
and so both lots will still be R2.
Yes.
Correct.
And R2 is single family or multiple family.
Single family or duplex primarily.
Which I guess, you know, we keep coming back to that we need more affordable housing, we need more density in the city limits, and we have this R2 zone that still allows for single residence, which to me seems like it's not helping to solve our density issue. If we really want more density in the city, then an R2 should be required to have multiple units on it.
I think that's a really smart observation and a good idea. But our code right now doesn't read that way. It allows a single family or a duplex or twin home basically in the R2. The R3, you can get quite a bit more density if you do a multifamily product. And there have been discussions about allowing some flexibility for affordable housing. It's called the PAD ordinance, or the Planned Affordable Housing Ordinance. But it was not applied to the R2 zone after a lot of public input. But it's certainly something that we can look at in the future if we decide to really densify even the R2 area in the city. A lot of the undeveloped areas are R3, and so we are getting multiple dwelling units on those. In addition, R2, they are eligible for accessory dwelling units. So both these lots would be. The second lot is for the son, Dan, to actually have a lot and home of its own. And it will be a modular, well, it's already there on the site, but it's modular and affordable. And they could come in someday in the future and perhaps subdivide again, because the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. So that might be an option in the future. But as of today, both these lots meet the requirements of the R2 zone.
Is there any issue with the shared entrance, the shared drive?
We have an agreement,
Okay,
yeah, so that's fine.
okay. Anything else? Could I have a motion?
What number is this? I'd like to move that we have a vote in favor of approval of the.
The motion's on the screen.
It's on the screen. And there is a condition on there that we've incorporated on the staff side.
Specific direction to the applicant and staff as additional information is needed.
No.
It's down there, right here.
Towards the
Oh.
engineering.
Trying to make it
Oh.
easy for you.
Okay. I move that we forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the approval of the Mick Minor Subdivision, City of Moab Resolution 63-2019, subject to the following condition: all engineering comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the city engineer prior to the review by City Council.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Subdivision passes unanimously, or the recommendation does. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item on the agenda. The review and possible recommendation to the City Council of Resolution 64-2019, approving the Bailey minor subdivision of property located at 62 South, 200 East.
Alrighty, so moving right along with our applicant Kyle and Carrie Bailey at 46 South, 200 East. A little bit of background on this minor subdivision. On July 7th, the pre-application was submitted to the city with a preliminary plat draft reviewed by the DRT. The revised plat was submitted and reviewed again on August 28th. On October 30th, the applicant submitted the shared driveway agreement as requested by the city engineer, At this point, the Bailey Minor subdivision application was submitted to the city for Moab City Planning Commission. With our project summary, the subdivision splits one parcel, 0.74 acres into two. The intent of the property owner is to maintain lot 1, 0.23 acres where the current existing house is located, and allocate lot 2 with 0.51 acres as a potential location for residential use existing in a flag lot. There's a shared driveway agreement where the current driveway is located. The driveway is split between lot 1 and lot 2 that allows driveway access to be used by both properties. On our map, you can see on the lower section of the parcel displayed, there's a larger existing house gradient square. That's the existing house we're referring to in lot 1. And then just above that is a slightly coloration of the driveway that's split between the two parcels, and then the lot 2 to the left side. There's another parcel to the north of that that is not included in this subdivision. And
So the current driveway does not extend right now back to lot 2, but it will.
Yes,
correct.
Okay.
and the applicant is here.
Okay. Kyle, Mr. Bailey, would you like to come up and say anything to us? Okay.
It does have a curb cut at that point, and it's a 30, so it'd be a 30-foot easement or 30-foot drive.
Okay.
There.
Okay.
It does extend to the back. It's for affordable housing. Lot 1 is my daughter, so she'll be able to.
Okay. Questions or comments? All right. If there are any questions or comments, may I have a motion?
I move to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the approval of the Bailey Minor Subdivision, City of Moab Resolution Number 64, 2019, subject to the following condition. 1, all engineering comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the city engineer prior to review by the City Council.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The positive recommendation goes forward unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And those two will be heard by the city council on the 10th of December, theoretically.
Okay. Moving on, our next action item is a public hearing and a possible recommendation to the City Council on Ordinance 2019-30, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code, Section 17.21, C2 Commercial Residential Zone, and 17.31 RC Resort Commercial Zone to allow new overnight accommodations subject to revised development standards. So if you would like to speak at the public hearing for the proposed new code, there are white forms out in the hallway. If you'd like to fill those out, we will certainly open up the public hearing.
And if you don't want to speak, that's absolutely fine. Some people don't like to. You can just write down your comments and leave them with Joey or with me, and those will go on the record as well.
Laura?
I was going to do a brief presentation. So, the Planning Commission and City Council at the city and the county have both been talking about restrictions on new overnight accommodations for a year or so, probably longer. But about a year ago, on February 5th, a little less than, both the county and the city adopted temporary land use regulations, which bought us some time, but the temporary land use regulations basically said that we would not accept any new overnight accommodations applications for at least the next 6 months. There were a number of meetings after that decision was made. Landmark Design Incorporated was brought in, and they did public scoping meetings in March. We had community outreach in April, public workshop on April 30th. There were a number of alternatives. We had a joint city-county work session on May 7th, and a joint work session with the City Council and Planning Commission on May 23rd. There were more discussions throughout the month of June. And then on June 27th, 2019, the Planning Commission recommended and ultimately the City Council approved an ordinance which removed overnight accommodations from basically all the zones in Moab, with specific direction for us to move forward with developing new development standards so that when we allow new overnight accommodations, they will be of a scale and look, and that we would be, that are more in tune with the wishes of the community. So once we did that, we started working on the development standards. Lots of meetings with the Planning Commission, September, October, November. And also the county is doing a similar effort. And they they had work sessions with their Planning Commission, joint work sessions with their city council meetings. So we are down to the point where we have drafted some development standards, and we're having a public hearing on those tonight, only in the C2 and the RC zones. We expect the other zones to come along, and we'll have discussions at that point in time about what we want to allow and how much and sizes and all of those kinds of things. But we decided to start with 2 zones, and we've discussed the Planning Commission and City Council direction in August, when they after they directed us to come up with these development standards, indicated that they wanted the development standards to include energy efficiency, density and size, aesthetics, including height, bulk, and scale, facade variation, color, and materials, view shed, landscape buffering, mixed-use requirements, water carrying capacity and existing infrastructure capacity, and contribution to cumulative traffic connectivity, contribution to non-motorized micro-vehicle transportation network. And that's word for word from their direction to us and from the code. So what we've done is draft code changes to the C2 and RC zones to allow new overnight accommodations to apply under new development standards. So we're talking about a public hearing tonight and possible recommendation to the City Council on the code amendments by the Planning Commission. Tomorrow is a work session with the City Council from 10 to 12 to go over the proposed amendments. And then the City Council is having a public hearing, or not a public hearing, I'm sorry, a public meeting on December 10th, 2019, where they could adopt these development standards. And the development standards there are 2 documents out there, but the one that is the most recent is this one. It looks like this. And what that document is it is the standards. I'll show it to you. It is the development standards that we have been discussing. So this ordinance would amend the C2 and the RC zone to allow new overnight accommodations with new development standards. And the new language is all in red, and the existing language in the code is just regular. And the findings reference a number of comments and concerns.
Laura,
Yes?
we're already done. You've been approved.
Oh, you're done. You're done.
Yeah.
There you go. Sure, no problem.
We pick up our buildings, something, whatever later?
City Council approves it on the 10th.
Right.
But Chuck signed it, so you should be ready, good to go on the 10th.
Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Allison. I didn't see him.
He's hard to miss.
Yes. There are a number of issues that were raised during all of the public meetings that we had. One of them had to do with too many overnight accommodations and being out of balance with our commercial ground being used up by overnight accommodations as opposed to having commercial that actually serves the residents and the visitors of our community. That was one issue. Another one had to do with just visual impact, scale. Some of the buildings were too big. Some of the buildings were not as attractive as some people would like them to be. And then there was concern about infrastructure adequacy and water. There's also growing interest on the part of Moab for energy efficiency. We're about to adopt a new sustainability plan, and what's in the ordinance right now is consistent with that. So we've been working on all those things with understanding in the background that citizens are concerned about more new overnight accommodations. On the other hand, we have a development community and we have private property owners who may want to apply for overnight accommodations in the future. So we wanted to allow them an opportunity to do that. The standards as drafted are they're not really strict. They're not really that much different than a lot of other communities require. The one thing that the Planning Commission is recommending to City Council is to limit the size of new overnight accommodation projects. And that limit would be 20,000 square feet per building or a total of 60,000 square feet per project. And the City Council will decide if they agree with those numbers, but that's what the Planning Commission is recommending. The county is also moving forward with this process, and their recommendation on maximum building size is 20,000 square feet. Total project size is 50,000 square feet. So we're pretty consistent, which is important because we don't want people to kind of play the city and the county off of each other. We want to be as consistent as possible. And they are looking also to have a public hearing and adopt very similar standards so that we're kind of all talking the same language. So we have, come on. So the beginning of it just cites some of the issues that have been brought up. Overnight accommodations also have impacted our long-term housing stock. And we all know that we have affordable housing, employee housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it. We have issues providing adequate housing for folks who live and work in our community. And with the advent of Airbnb and VRBO and some of those things, some of our existing housing stock has been taken out of long-term rentals. Those that exist and have business licenses today are allowed to continue in terms of Airbnb, but new Airbnb in our residential zones are not allowed. And when the ordinance was adopted to delete the overnight accommodations from all zones, there was a provision that said existing overnight accommodations, it's called established overnight accommodations, are allowed to continue as though they were legal uses, and there is a map associated with that. It's basically everything that was already done. And included some parcels that may not have been developed yet, but are in areas that are surrounded by overnight accommodations. So that decision was already made. This would allow and open up opportunities for new applications to be filed. So I won't go over these. They were available online, and I won't go over them with any detail. But the requirements for the C2 and the RC are very similar. The first thing we talked about was energy and requiring net zero energy, or up to, shall produce 80% of their energy needs on site through whatever means they want to propose. They are encouraged to purchase remaining energy needs through renewable energy credits like the Blues, what's
Sky.
it called?
Blue Sky Program.
Blue Sky, right, initiative. And there are other ways to meet this criteria, including if you wanted to do LEED, which should all be capitalized, and thank you for that. If you wanted to do a LEED certification, which is a separate process altogether from the city, you could certainly do that. Or if you wanted to meet the Green Building Challenge, which again is a completely separate certification by an outside nonprofit. Those two things, if you got certification for those, that would meet this requirement. Water, we're talking about minimizing the amount of sod on any site to 10% and requiring water catchment systems that would then be used for beneficial use on the property itself for landscaping irrigation. I had one of the comments that I received talked about low flow water fixtures and toilets. Right now, our building code already requires very low flow, everything, all the plumbing fixtures. And so that applies to everybody now. So we didn't add that as emphasis. We understand that that already exists. Then the third thing is to require bioretention or bioinfiltration, which simply means that on the site there are landscaped areas or perhaps rock areas that can take the runoff and infiltrate it rather than tunnel it, channel it all into our storm drain system, which then has to be dealt with. So we're trying to encourage things to occur on site. There are soil conditions where that won't work, and we recognize that. Transportation, there are a number of different things that we're requiring. It's not, space for a transit or shuttle stop in the future. We think that's an important part of our overall long-term regional transportation plan, which we don't have yet, but we will be working on. And then things like bike storage and again, we provide opportunities for the developer to tell us how they want to reduce vehicle trips over what would be normally expected according to the engineering standards. Mixed use, we are doing kind of two different approaches. One in the C2 zone, which is inside the city limits, inside kind of downtown. The C2 would require that first floor street frontage be commercial. And then above that, it could be overnight accommodations or affordable housing units, but for purposes of this discussion, it could be overnight accommodations. There's some design guidelines about transparency and making sure that people feel comfortable as pedestrians on the street and that there's some interaction between the new commercial area and people who are walking by. Building height, the way this is drafted at this point, the maximum building height would be 2 stories and 30 feet. An additional story and an extra 10 feet could be reached if one of a number of different ideas are developed, including providing additional affordable employee workforce housing above and beyond what we already require. And also to discuss dedication of land to the city for other qualified entity for the purposes of building affordable housing. Let me look back. And then there's some others for the RC zone that include civic space, usable open space, public art, additional commercial uses that would serve the community. That is a requirement, and if they decide to kind of go above and beyond, then additional building height could be granted, and there are some options that are set forth in the code that talks about how that could be achieved. Maximum building size and project size, we discussed. The recommendation is for maximum building size of 20,000 square feet, maximum project size of 60,000 square feet. 5% of the gross floor area can be support commercial. If someone wants to do a master plan with commercial uses actually on their site, like if they had enough land to do overnight accommodations, maximum 60,000 square feet, and also had area that they wanted to designate to a small grocery store or commercial uses that in the North Corridor provide services for those folks that are staying out there, like a restaurant that's open to the public or stores, or maybe it's a place for farmers markets, or perhaps it's space for community gardens or a restaurant. Some of those kinds of public beneficial uses, they can propose that in a master plan and potentially achieve the additional building height. In terms of the architectural standards and site design standards, they are pretty standard. Talking about breaks in the facades so we don't have big boxes, requiring high quality and durable materials with accents of other materials just so that these buildings will last and not fall apart in a few years. And the things that are proposed are not uncommon in other jurisdictions, especially other jurisdictions that are resort-related or tourist-oriented. Places like Springdale, Sedona, even Carbondale, which is not, it's a sort of a bedroom community of Aspen, as well as a lot of other communities, use similar kinds of standards, just really to avoid the look of the kind of big box that may be corporate driven. We're hoping that we get designs that are more in tune with what we like it to see in Moab. So with that, there are still a few unresolved issues, the biggest one being metering. The Planning Commission recommends to the City Council that some form of metering be proposed, which is limitation on the total number either of square feet or the total number of units per year that are allowed, so that we are managing the rate of change in the community. We've just come off of a number of years of lots and lots of overnight accommodations. I think people have a desire to let those be absorbed into the community. We also have some projects that are in the works, either under construction or about to begin construction. So we don't want to allow too many overnight accommodations, additional accommodations, until some of those move forward and we see what's going on with vacancy rates. The City Council will be talking about that tomorrow in their work session extensively. And it's something that we need to refine, whether we are required to keep a certain ratio of overnight accommodations to permanent residents in order for us to qualify for our resort city sales tax. And that sales tax is absolutely vital to our community. We do not charge our own property tax. All of our revenue pretty much comes from transient room tax or resort city sales tax and other kinds of sales tax. So with that.
Okay, ladies. Comments, questions?
So on item F, the maximum building and project
Oh.
size,
I'm sorry, do I need to open the public
I
hearing
think
first
we should
before
do that
have discussion?
first. Yeah, and then we can
Okay.
go into discussion.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, I received a number of public comments via email today. And all of those comments have been forwarded to both the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay.
So if you want to speak, we only have one, but there may be other people who are here. Please just grab one of these real quick in the hallway and fill it out and hand it in up here so you can speak.
Okay. Okay, I will open the public hearing at 6:35 p.m. And so right now I have Amy, come on up.
One other thing I wanted to add while Amy comes up is this is a starting point. And certainly in the future, if we find that our architectural standards are doing what we want them to do, and the city council and planning commission decide that maybe bigger projects can be massaged to fit into our community, it's always something that we can change. We wanted to start out fairly limited, just so that we can let the existing projects build out and truly function. So that those size requirements are pretty tight, with the understanding that we would probably relook at them in a few years, a couple of years anyway. Thank you.
Amy, maybe you tell us who you are and
My name is Amy Weiser, and I'm here representing my employer that has property in both the RC and the C2 zone. Can I have a little bit more than 3 minutes, since I'm the only one that signed in and I have a lot of questions?
yes.
Okay, I'll go as fast as I can.
You can also submit comments in writing that they will get and that the city council will get.
Okay. I just want to thank you, the commission. I know you guys you and Nora have been working really hard, and I know you had an aggressive schedule, and you're rocking your schedule. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I know you guys are working really hard. So I've got a couple questions. The water language that was in Nora's agenda summary,
Yeah.
it got cut short, and it continues to get cut short in all of the proposed ordinances. And basically, the language in your narrative was great, but it says, hang on, it says maximum feasible rainwater catchment system, and to use the water for beneficial on-site uses such as reducing blah, blah, blah. That didn't get in the other versions. So I was just hoping that that would get included. It stops in the other versions at maximum feasible rainwater catchment system, and then it just dies. And then it says applicant shall apply for water rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some additional language in there.
Yeah, which was great language. I was just hoping that would stay. And then landscaping requirements. I know that the sustainability director recommended some landscaping ideas. And are the landscaping requirements in another section of the code? And if so, there's no reference to them in the proposed ordinances.
We do have a separate section of the code that deals with landscaping requirements. There's also a section of the code that deals with projects greater than 30,000 square feet, and those would continue to apply.
Okay.
And there are some specific landscape standards. We
Okay.
need to update our landscape standards based upon a lot of the work that Rosemary has done on sustainability. So that is a follow-up to this, but for now, our existing landscape standards will apply.
Okay, thank you. And then I think you clarified for me my other question about the 20,000 square feet per building. So you can do more than one building of overnight accommodations. Each building cannot exceed 20,000 square feet, and you can have a total of 60. Is that okay?
Yes.
Does the 60,000 for the maximum project, does that include the required housing?
No.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
And if a developer chose to include additional affordable housing above and beyond what's already required with the WAHU, that would not subtract from. So it's 60,000 square feet of overnight accommodations. So if somebody wants to do a market or, something else with maybe additional affordable units, that would not count kind of against them in terms of the overnight accommodation allowances.
Okay, great. And then the 80% energy usage, I was just wondering that you must produce the 80% of energy on your project site. I was just wondering if there's any other cities in Utah that have something close to it, or in Colorado. It just seemed like the 80% was rather high.
It's consistent with some other communities. There are some communities that are going to net zero, and we realize that that's not realistic. So we're recommending 80%, which is a fairly high standard to meet. We understand that. And again, it might be one that after we work with it for a while, discover that maybe, it's too difficult to achieve. But at this point in time, that's what we're proposing.
Okay. Do you, I'll get with you later. I was just wondering, I was going to check other communities that have it and just kind of read what theirs says and maybe see how it's going for them. But And then transportation section, it says, there's an alternate that says, a narrative to reduce vehicle trips below ITE trip generation manual by 20%.
Right.
So either you provide the shuttle stop or you provide pathways, and then there was an alternate. My question was, is that the reduce vehicle trips, what is narrative, number one? Okay, and then reduce vehicle trips by 20%, is that on your project site, or is that,
Yes,
okay, good.
contributed by your project according to ITE standards.
Okay, so some other way to reduce the trips by 20%.
Yes.
Okay,
Acknowledging that we're just suggesting some ideas and there may be others.
okay. Okay, and then the mixed use section for C2, number 2 says interface between public and private realm. I just wanted to know a definition for interface, if there is one.
So I added a definition
Okay,
of civic space.
yes.
And again, this is something that I may want to play with, but it refers to places in which a community performs or engages in some part of its political or social life. More broadly, civic space can include spaces used for community activities, including open-air environments where public activities such as assemblies or speeches occur. Because most civic spaces are intentionally designed for use by the public, they express values and culture of a community and have potential to shape how individuals behave, what they perceive, and how institutions perform. So that deals with the civic space requirements. In terms of interface, what we're talking about is, for example, on Main Street, we have Hyatt, what is it?
Hyatt Place?
Hyatt Place? Not the one that's right in town, that's not a Hyatt
Yes.
Place.
Homewood Suites, yeah.
Homewood Suites. And certainly, they could have done more in terms of the Main Street experience for pedestrians and for people walking by, whether it be tourists, maybe, having some outdoor dining and some things to kind of encourage people to interact with the use itself. Usually it's done with windows and something going on behind those windows other than just parking, which tends to happen in projects. Perhaps uses that the public might be interested in as well.
Okay, and the reason I was asking is because the C2 requires the commercial on the first floor.
It does.
So I guess I'm just wondering if there's commercial on the first floor and then there's an entrance that goes to the hotel somewhere in that.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get in the hotel, is the commercial retail the interface, or is there some transition that is my question?
It would be the interface if
Okay.
it's designed that way.
Okay. And then the civic space, there was still a blank on what percentage that would be.
Oh, yeah.
Was that decided on or not yet?
We need to come up with a number for that.
Okay. Okay, and then under the mixed use for the RC zone, it says that there's a 5% support commercial. Is that a maximum? It just said, I think it said, let me look at the language. I think it said you are allowed to, but I was just wondering if there was a maximum.
No, the assumption is that you'll do, most hotels do a minimum of 5%, and that's fine. If you want to do additional commercial that is more oriented toward the public, then that could count toward getting perhaps additional building height or some of those kinds of things.
But for the support commercial, that 5% might be it? Not the commercial for the public?
It's an assumption that that's about, what hotels generally provide, at least 5% of support commercial.
Okay. I think it just might be nice.
As it's written, it seems like it's a maximum.
Okay,
Yeah, I just, maybe just to clarify if it's a maximum or if it's not.
okay.
And then it also, under site configuration and building design, most of them say we'll have examples.
Yes,
Okay, are those?
graphics.
I figured they would be graphics.
Yes.
Are those coming before the council adopts?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not tomorrow, but before the council approves it, we will definitely have those. And Corey's been collecting them.
Okay, so will the public get to comment on those or no?
It depends on how city council wants to do their public meeting.
Okay, so but they'd be available to see before the December 10th council meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then for the RC zone, it says that parking shall be on the side and the rear. It doesn't say anything about parking for C2 that I could find. So I just wanted to clarify that.
It should say the same thing. I'm
Okay.
surprised it
I
doesn't.
didn't see anything, but maybe I missed it. In the RC, it was under the building design section.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't see it there in the C2, nor did I see it anywhere else.
Yeah, it doesn't seem it's in there, no.
Okay.
So it would be the same, it would be side and rear?
Yes.
Okay.
And Amy, I hate to interrupt, but we do have another.
That was all
Okay.
my questions.
Okay, good. All right.
Got it, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Ariana? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Coming up, state your name, please.
Good evening, Ariana Lowe. Thank you all for being here. I was wondering if there are any provisions in the draft that are going to allow for control of how fast things are approved and built, sort of like the county's draft includes.
Do you want me to answer that now? Since
Sure.
since we don't have a huge crowd. Yes, and that was the metering that I was talking about.
I might have missed that part.
Yeah, so the Planning Commission is recommending to the City Council that we limit the number of whether it's total square footage or whether it's number of units per year. And the Planning Commission asks that that be based on rational factors like water usage or the ratio between our overnight accommodations and our permanent residents, which is an important ratio, but it be fact-based. And we're having a work session with the City Council tomorrow to talk a little bit more about that. So yes, there is a desire. What that looks like, I don't know at this point in time.
Okay.
And certainly we can, before it's December 10th, we will amend the code to include that language.
And so, like, I don't know, maybe you can elaborate on the whole right of use that Utah has as far as developers or property owners being able to engage right of use with their property. Is that something that Moab's in danger of falling prey to? And is there a way that the city can
We're
protect
always trying to balance private property rights with the interests of the community. That's kind of what zoning is. That's what it's all about. And so we have to respect that there are private property rights. We can't say, no, you can't develop anything on your property. We do have the right granted to us by the state and also by the feds to govern ourselves and our community for public health, safety, and welfare. And zoning falls under that category, and we are allowed to regulate uses, sizes, aesthetics, setbacks, building height, all of those kinds of things are allowed. We are also allowed to change those. So that's basically what we're doing at this point, and why we have a public hearing, and why we did a couple months of public input, at the beginning of this process. And it is proposed to be a change. Even now, without allowing overnight accommodations, the RC and the C2 zones have a number of commercial uses that they could do. So now we're not saying you can't build anything. They could come in and do, some of in RC, they could do multifamily. They could, there are a variety of commercial uses that can be done. So they could do that today. And this just cracks the door open a little bit wider.
And then I guess my last question is just dark sky ordinance. Is that something that's just already built into the plan?
We've You've already adopted it.
It seems
So
like some hotels are not quite as dark sky as others.
they have 5 years to amateurize. So, and as new developments come in, we're requiring that they comply with the dark sky ordinance, both in lighting, exterior lighting, and in signs. And so that's implicit because it's in our code now, which is adopted. So all these buildings would have to be dark sky compliant. I could certainly add something for emphasis.
Yeah, I was just wondering because it just seemed like there was quite the discrepancy.
Yeah, they're kind of all over,
Because they
yeah,
are not implemented
Yeah.
right.
Not
They
been-
have time.
yet. Right.
Right.
Even new ones though, like even new hotels?
It depends on when they actually filed for an application. So if they had an application in before the night sky ordinance was adopted, they don't have to meet it. But what we're telling people with the new hotels that are coming online is they're going to have to in 5 years anyway. So wouldn't it be best to become compliant when you first open? And we've had good success with that.
And the city has not yet implemented the enforcement of those codes
Correct.
either. So
Yeah.
people are not turning off their lights when they should be,
Gotcha.
and that's a big thing.
It's gradual.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to speak? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing at 6:52 PM. Thank you.
Okay, so Allison asked me, since we still have some holes, in particular the metering hole, you could forward a recommendation to the city council, assuming that they will go through a process and come up with the metering that they are comfortable with. So the meeting with the city council is on December 10th. We could do a special meeting before that with the planning commission if you're uncomfortable making a recommendation tonight so that they'll have it before December 10th. Our goal really is to get this done by the end of the year, so there's a little bit of, we've built in a couple weeks of flexibility. So that's all I'll say about that.
Go ahead.
I have just some general comments if we're gonna just open discussion on kind
Yes.
of where things stand now. Metering, I think, is really important. I think that was pretty clear, and I think a lot of what the public comment we've gotten back has been the desire to have some sort of control outside of our development standards that we're proposing on just the number that I think really, really has to, and I'm pretty sure city council agrees about this just based on conversations with individual council members, that it needs to retroactively apply to projects already in the pipeline right now, where those not yet completed projects that we're already seeing that were vested, things that are going up now, things that haven't even been started, it needs to account for those in our metering going forward, rather than starting fresh with just new applications after the doors open again.
Okay, I have not heard that, so that's
I've-
good input.
I'm-
And I expect
I'm
the
pretty sure
council.
city council would say the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure they would,
Yeah.
and like I said, I haven't heard anything really
For sure.
from
And I
them.
think that, because I know a lot of comments reference the fact that we have a fairly large percentage that aren't there or even, have not broken ground yet. So just trying to sort of wrap the community's mind around what
Right.
they're looking at.
Right.
And I think that alone would assuage a lot of concerns
Yes.
about opening the gates again. Just the ability to be like, all right, yeah, we're gonna just let these play out or have it as part of the calculation and say, yeah, the way the numbers work those first couple years, there's literally one new project that can apply and be approved because of all those ones already in. I wanted to make sure, and I was just pulling up code, that we have, when we're saying commercial uses, I know we go to great lengths to do good definitions for civic uses and public open space.
Yes.
But I want to make sure that what's currently in code for commercial use actually tracks with what we're thinking we want OAs to have required on their property. When we're saying you have to have first floor commercial use, that's not just a convenience store that's only going to cater to the guests. But as it stands now, I think that would I
have,
don't know that it would, I feel like we almost would like to maybe put a laundry list in or some examples, so it's a little clearer, because right now, commercial use in code means activity involving the sale of goods or services carried out for profit.
and there is a breakdown, you know, in each section of the code, like the C2 has all of the permitted uses, and it breaks it down into like retail and doctor's offices and stuff like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
you're right, I have not done anything within the C2 that modifies the existing commercial uses that are allowed.
For sure. I just want it to be something that's actually useful. And also, and you're gonna laugh at me because I've been the biggest proponent of like, you know, let's make things a little denser and everything. Just thinking about it, looking at existing projects, I think 60,000 is way too big for C2.
Thank you.
I do too,
I really
we
do.
hadn't
Like
talked
thinking
about
of
that.
so the Archway Inn is 60,000 square feet.
And it's huge.
And it's huge. And we're talking about parcels that are like surrounded by our zones or on the creek, West Center Street, all of Helena's properties. Like, that's giant.
Yeah.
That's like the helipad times 5.
And most of the parcels would not come close to accommodate
Correct.
that.
But just, you know, people combine or something, you know, just kind of that.
So do you have a recommendation?
Again, not wanting to make it some
Okay.
arbitrary number, no,
Yeah.
but 60,000 is
It's too
pretty
big.
darn big.
Okay. And I agree, we just hadn't
Like
talked
the
about
one
that.
parcel that maybe that applies to. I
Right.
just don't think we should have it in there.
Right.
And then that, making sure that we're getting the kind of commercial use we really truly want, and if we need to narrow that to what we really truly want, like, let's do it.
And my number would be 20,000.
In the C2?
Because where's our little example sheet, that's so helpful.
So that's bigger than the Apache,
Okay.
bigger than the Bowen, bigger than the Rustic.
Oh, yeah. And when we're talking about C2, we're talking about Williams Way, West Center Street, that whole area back there, this property and the city. What else? Over on 100 South, there's a commercial property by the creek over there, that's C2. And then everything that's over by the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
Get rid of the,
And maybe
I mean,
20,000 is too big as well,
Yeah,
but
and no one wants, we don't want a 60,000 square foot hotel where Texas is right now, because that's C2.
Right.
Yeah, adding on to that, did we, I did none of this. Did you change the setbacks for C2 for hotels? Are the setbacks changed at all, or the side lots changed at all, or any of that?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I know I increased,
Discussing that, but it was
Yeah.
never.
I did increase the setbacks in the RC.
yeah.
But I don't,
I don't
I
think
can't
we
remember
even
what I did.
discussed the C2.
No, I don't think we did.
left it for, we just talked about the RC.
Yeah.
yeah, I may not have addressed that. But we can take a look at that if you wish.
And
C2.
I think that with that significant reduction in allowable size, as well as really narrowing what those qualifying commercial first floor uses can be,
Okay.
that might assuage most of my concerns about the C2. Otherwise, my recommendation would be that we just do RC right now, just because the C2, I think, is one of the more controversial zones that we're doing this in, and to sort of come out the gate with that, unless it's like pretty narrow. We certainly don't want every C2 property owner to put in an application for something the day that this opens that aren't well-planned or well-sited, just so that they can sort of get a foot in the door. We do want to open up those uses again, but I think if there's anywhere we should be particularly careful, it's that zone, just because it is interspersed all over residential areas in town.
Okay, would be an approach.
I would second Kaya in adopting stronger standards for the C2 than for the RC.
And we have for
Right.
a lot of things, but I don't know why the size thing flew over my head until now, and I
Yeah.
apologize, Nora.
No, me too.
Well, I didn't, I was, yeah. I didn't think of everything. That's just the way it is.
I thought we had decided on the 60 Brian's concerns about energy efficiency, that in the RC, we were gonna go with 60,000 and get rid of the 20,000
Max building.
max building.
I thought that was part of our discussion as well. Do you guys remember?
I can't remember where we left it, and that was my concern too, where if it's
Yeah.
gonna be big, let's not put arbitrary spacing when it's gonna be less efficient and.
So is there any particular reason why I know the county has the individual building size
Yes.
maximum, but is there any reason that we need to?
We talked about it just to break up the scale.
Right.
And that was sort of the consensus that I heard in your last work session when you talked about that, but you can feel free to make changes to that if you wish.
Can you just put a big question mark next to that for city
Yeah.
council, and maybe we can get their input on that before we decide to
Okay.
Because
axe
I
it
think
or
the
not?
final was that our facade, requirements and variation in
Right.
scale and design probably covered that.
Right. And that was the impression that I got, is we were going to take out the building maximum and just leave it as project size. But again, city council's input, if you're going to meet with them anyway, it would be nice to have that input.
Okay.
And then my final comment was just going back to that, not just having a little grab and go for hotel guests when we're talking about commercial space. And then also, again, looking back at the RC, and I apologize, I feel like I've kind of come to different conclusions than I've articulated before, but I don't know that I'm okay with just civic space or open space for what a developer is getting. I think the reason we are opening up new OAs is to incentivize other commercial development to actually happen, realizing that it might be cheaper to let a parcel go undeveloped rather than to just put a restaurant there or just put a dry cleaner or something like that. And we want an incentive for those other commercial uses. And I feel like let's require it if we're gonna require it. Just
Well,
flat out.
and what we talked about was allowing an extra story if they provide commercial uses above and beyond the grab and go stuff. But again, that could be revisited.
Yeah.
But it's the open space that I'm scared of.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy just to
Yes.
not develop something rather
Right.
than to put something in that the community can use.
Yeah.
Right.
And I-
Say that again?
So I'm afraid that if we just leave the civic space as open space, then everybody's just going to leave a plot of dirt back there.
Oh, for sure, and that's
And-
fine too.
yeah.
And I think civic space, it's great, and they're wonderful components to have that are part of projects, but that's not what we're trying, and
To
not what the
promote.
community has said they want us to really work to promote. So and where am I looking here? It's the RC zone, where it's saying percentages of civic and open space which haven't been set yet.
Right.
All new, D5? All new projects are required to provide X amount of civic space, usable open space, public art, additional commercial uses. So they can have their additional commercial uses, but I feel like, I really do think we want to actually just say commercial uses, or we'll get a large new overnight accommodation hotel project that has open space and public space and isn't gonna actually have
Okay.
any commercial.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So,
Similar to
So
what we have
limited-
for C2, it doesn't need to be the whole first floor, but we do need to have
okay,
a percentage of whatever we define as our C2 commercial use, whatever that narrower definition is. in some
yeah, the
way.
C2, we're saying first floor retail,
Yeah,
or first floor commercial, period.
yeah.
And in the RC zone, we sort of decided, well, we talked about many of the hoteliers, some may have parcels big enough to do a master plan to include freestanding commercial uses, and we want to encourage that, which is why the building height increase came up. But we could just require a certain amount of civic space and open space, but not provide the incentive for the extra story on those. And then the extra story would be for additional affordable housing, land to build additional affordable housing, or commercial uses larger than 20,000 square feet or something like that.
I think what I'm saying is I would like to see something similar to what we have in C2, where it's just a flat requirement for usable commercial space.
Okay.
Whether that's 25% of the first story or something like that. I
And-
mean, it can be a
and-
restaurant, but just something.
And we have had discussions with this, and I wish Becky was here for this, but I think,
Yeah.
we've kind of gone round and round with this, that the
We have.
hotels are not.
We have, I know, and that was why
Yeah,
I
and
couched
so-
it in an apology.
And so, the hotels don't necessarily want to put in a restaurant or store if they know they won't make any money at it. And
Right.
so we've got to find that balance between what they're willing to do and what we would like. If there's a new 60,000 square foot hotel that goes out in the North Corridor, chances are they are not going to want to put a dry cleaner in it. And can we make them? I don't know.
Yeah.
We can make them give the space out there, but will it just sit empty? And is that good for us?
That's the concern.
That's the concern.
And it's a big concern for developers, and it also applies with even multifamily development. If you're requiring them to do the whole first floor as commercial, that doesn't make sense until you get a critical mass of people around it in order to support that commercial.
Right.
So in the North Corridor, we're really kind of emphasizing anything that would take cars off the road from people driving into town. That kind of commercial that's really more oriented toward the tourist and residents, And then in town, definitely we want to key on resident services as well as some other things. There's another effort going on. Remember, we talked about the community nodes and so that discussion is actually moving forward, and Landmark Design is working on that for us. So some of the C5 areas, like around Milts and Davis Market and, that whole area, and then there's another area on the west side where we're talking about beefing up, whether it's the C5 zone or creating something different to really emphasize resident services in those areas. Right now, it's pretty much like hotels, motels are not allowed in the C5. It really does the intent of it is to serve the community needs.
So do you ladies have any comments about requiring commercial space in the RC zone?
In the RC, I don't necessarily think we need commercial space. I actually would kind of prefer not to see commercial space required. I would like to see like a difference in the square footage of the buildings, maybe going down a little bit in square footage, and then encouraging housing developments that have mandatory civic space and open space as a part of the housing development. And then they can get higher density or something in exchange for creating the housing that we need for the people who are going to be working at their hotels. So my preference would be to see more housing out there that's affordable. And that would be fewer trips of people living in Spanish Valley and driving to the North Corridor to go to work every day. And hopefully more people would be able to live next to where they work.
And we have talked about that, giving them an extra story or whatever it is, if they give us an additional X amount of affordable housing units over and above the already assured housing policy. Would you like to increase those numbers or talk about something on top of that, or?
I would like to ideally lower the square footage.
The 60,000?
We're at 60,000 right now. Maybe take off 20,000 and then they can earn back, start at 40,000 and they can earn back 20,000 square feet in open space housing combinations. And that might be somewhere like they can buy a lot somewhere else in town where we decide that we need another city park and they can dedicate that. So I do think we need to actually think about this a lot more before it's implemented.
I agree, and I've been saying that for quite some time.
At this point, I don't think.
So,
You've done so much.
Yeah.
This is like incredible how much work got done, but if
There's
it's
still
something.
details for sure.
Yeah, if it's something that we're going to live with for the next 50 years, it's not there yet.
so Nora, can you talk to us about the legislative pressures that you are under to open up this door?
Yeah, we have really made commitments to some state legislators that we will allow new overnight accommodation somewhere around the first of the year, without, and not just to do lip service to really actually come up with something that would allow somebody to apply in a meaningful way. And that's why the lower square footages and things like that, that's why we came in with those requirements, realizing that in the future you might want to make them bigger. But if there are things that you want to pare down more or be more specific on for whether it's additional square footage or an additional floor of overnight accommodations, we could flesh that out a little bit more.
I think my comment just with requiring some sort of usable commercial space in every new project is this idea that when people who live here see a new overnight accommodation being built, they know from the get-go that they are going to get something out of it tangible at the same time. I think that was really it, realizing that right now, maybe the North Quarter, the RC zone is very tourism-centric, but town is changing, things are changing, and, you know, if there's housing up there, they're gonna want a market or something that's not just like, you know, snacks in the hotel lobby.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess realizing that we can open that up, see if it works, and if nobody takes, again, we can't go, you know, we can't go
Right.
back if it's feasible. But I know there's entrepreneurs in town who maybe a space in the first floor of a hotel in the Northern Quarter would not be as much as trying to buy an existing
Sure.
property on Main Street
Yeah.
or rent it. And there probably would be a desire for restaurants or small businesses or clinics or who the heck knows.
Right, and that would.
We can always go back from there.
Yeah.
We just can't
I understand.
try to require it after we've already approved stuff. And I feel like that might all get gobbled up pretty darn quick the minute we
I'm
open
just
things up
trying,
again.
I was trying to provide incentives for
Yeah.
people, some of
Yeah.
those things by that
I guess
third
maybe-
story.
Yeah, they're not strong enough. I don't know. I don't know that anything we have in the RC zone now is going to actually result in any new commercial uses.
It may not.
Yeah.
I agree on that. In the next 10 years, the whole zone is gonna change. I think looking about 10 to 15 years from now, I think they're gonna be finished with the pile, and they will not be able to put housing on that. So it's gonna be something.
Right,
And so.
pile, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so, you know, I just, my brain just can't wrap around I really can't wrap my mind around having any residential out there. I just can't. I can only see it as a business corridor, and it's just, I think, at least at this point in time in our history as a town, I think, and as in general, it's all about money. And it's not about creating housing for the common man. And so, and I think there's just gotta be a lot of changes that need to happen. And I think the job that the planning and zoning and city council that they have in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be extremely difficult, and I think it's going to be extremely complicated.
So, I agree. In the RC zone, what's fortunate about it is there are still some really large parcels that have a fair amount of depth. And I think they could do potentially, you know, a commercial, a overnight accommodation, and then behind, put some additional affordable housing units above and beyond what we're requiring with the Wahoo. And that's what I was really trying to get at with the extra story.
Right.
To provide that incentive.
Right.
I would love to see it, but at least in this, historically, in this point in time, I don't see it ever happening. I just don't.
So would we like to constrict the maximum project size down to something like 40,000 square feet, and then possibly add the extra 20 or the extra story? So they could go deeper or they could go higher as long as they provided us more affordable housing. Are we willing to go back down to 40?
I mean, 40 is smaller than the Hampton Inn,
Right.
but bigger than 2 Apache Inns, or bigger than, it's 10,000 square feet bigger than Moab My Place.
Right. Which we haven't seen yet, so it's hard to
No,
judge.
it's
but-
about to come out of the ground though, very
Right.
soon.
Yeah. So are we willing to do that?
So are you saying the 40,000 and the only way to earn back to 60 would be affordable housing
Yes.
versus the retail
Or
space?
commercial use.
Or
I would
commercial
say.
Because
use.
I'm more in, I like the idea of the retail space and making those commercial uses highly incentivized and maybe even stronger incentives. Because one of the things as a resident that we feel is the traffic.
Yeah.
And most people, when they complain about stuff, they complain about the traffic. I can't get where I need to go because there's bumper to bumper cars coming in from the north all the way through Maine. So if we can provide some services that benefit both the residents and the people visiting, and we can cut down on the amount of car trips to City Market into town, then we provide a better experience for people visiting and a better experience for people who live here.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
do think opening more commercial space is really gonna help those entrepreneurs or small business owners who like would have a great business for want of a place to put it, or a place they can afford. It's just like housing, we increase the inventory, and things get better as far as rental prices or buying.
So if we agree on the 40,
Could we do both of those things? We could leave it an extra story for housing
Yes.
or commercial, and 20,000
Yes.
square feet more for housing and commercial. So
Yes.
feasibly, you could, at the end of the day, if you had both housing and commercial yet to be kind of tailored, have a 60,000 square foot project with 3 stories,
Right.
which is what we have now that you could have just with housing. So we're basically taking away, but it could be in either, it's not necessarily, housing is a story and commercial is square footage, it could be.
Either way,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
So this
A
is
combination.
in addition to assured housing, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
above and beyond.
so
Above and beyond.
here's my question though, are we going to require this commercial on-site? Because I don't think right now we would require the affordable housing to be on-site. They could buy a partial in town.
Or donate
and-
land is
or
the way I
donate
have it
land.
drafted.
So what are
They
we
either
gonna
have
do
to
about?
build it or donate land so that somebody else can build
I
it.
think on-site.
So
I
commercial
I
on-site.
do think we don't, I mean, God forbid, what the economy crashes and we have a hotel wasteland north of town. I mean, just something where it is actual, there's reasons that people could be there. It would help small business owners. It would hopefully, just that idea that anytime someone sees a new hotel going up, they know that there's something coming that they can be excited about, even if they have no stake in the overnight accommodations industry, personally. I think that would be something nice for town.
So you tell me how,
Percentage or square feet, or do we have an idea?
What do you think would be fees? I know, I am still concerned about, the feasibility, and that was something that Becky mentioned and Brian was concerned about as well when they were here. How big is, I'm just trying to think, so the little offices that are behind the salon where Sundial Medicinals are, behind the Sultan in front of the Hampton, that little, do we know how big roughly those
wow, I don't, it's
spaces
not
are?
big.
They're not big, but I mean, even just that would go
Yeah.
a long way to have a storefront space to rent.
So, like a small market, and I'm not just talking convenience store, but a small market would be 20 to 30,000 square feet usually. And the big markets now are like 80,000 square feet.
But if we were to put something in, say, the size of the Raven Image, or,
Yeah.
the
Something like
thread shop, or, just.
So smaller retail spaces.
Yeah, small
Yeah.
retail spaces.
Yeah, like
But
Crystal's, Like
true
crystals or
retail,
something.
true, you know, someone who makes their tinctures and salves could rent it.
Right.
Someone could rent it as a cafe, someone could rent it
Right,
as a,
so something small. We aren't talking about, you know, a supermarket. We're talking about a Crystal's Cupcakes.
But it would be
or,
nice to have another little market out there,
Yeah,
you know?
and I'm
Yeah,
sure we'll,
right.
I'm sure we'll, I'm sure
Right.
we'll get something like
Yeah.
that.
but for a minimum size, I think a
Doggy
minimum,
daycare.
yeah, but for a minimum size, I think that
Will
we
that make
should,
a killing on the way to
oh
Arches?
my gosh,
Arches?
Yeah.
That would be great.
yeah. So something relatively small, I think will do. And I don't know, how big is Crystal's, or how big is the Moab thread shop, or, I don't know, but,
I,
I think
maybe,
that idea is spectacular, because if I had to do it all over again, I think Williams Way should have been that.
yeah,
Williams Way should have been retail and
Yeah.
housing.
yeah,
It probably should have.
Not been, it
Right.
should have not
Right.
been overnight rentals
yeah.
by
So-
any means. And so, anytime you guys want to do something like that, I'll stand behind you on that.
Yeah.
It was a waste.
What about accessibility to get to the retail? Like, what are the requirements going to be for somebody who's not staying in a hotel to access the commercial area?
They
Like,
can
just like
catch the
other
shuttle.
or a few designated parking spots with frontage on whatever the commercial space is. I mean, other places do that too. It's like it'll be like gearheads when they're in the hotel, when
Right.
that's all built, there'll be these spaces for gearhead customers only and not
Right.
people checking into the hotel.
So does the commercial space need to be like facing the road? What if they want to put it on the back of their building and hide it?
that's fine too, as long as we know it's there. I don't know.
Point.
We weren't trying to go to that level of detail. We were trying to let them give, you know, suggest sort of a package for us, but we could provide some additional detail.
And then also, one of the things that I saw with like Slick Rock, they built their own road to access the hotel,
The frontage road,
the
right?
frontage road. And then they faced the hotel to the frontage road that they had built for themselves. So instead of getting a hotel that was facing Main Street, that would be kind of like inviting and make sense, we got a hotel that was not facing Main Street, and it's not done being built, the Slick Rock Hotel. The big one that we approved after Valentine's Day last year. He came down for Valentine's Day, we didn't approve it, we didn't have very many people
The
here.
one next to the World Mark,
Yeah,
timeshares. Is
The
that the one
Slick Rock?
north of
It's
town?
not a Slick Rock hotel.
I thought it was
Is
called
it Happy Place
Slick
or
Rock.
something? Is it-
Moab, my place is not broken yet, but,
Element,
The World-
Element, maybe?
The World Mark was the one where he came down.
with the timeshares.
Yeah.
The World Mark is the timeshares, but if there is that one small hotel that's going to be in front of that, in
Yes.
front and a little bit south of that, and I can't remember the name of it, but is that the one you're talking about?
I thought it was called the Slick
It
Rock
might
Hotel.
be, so there are a couple in the works, Henry Shaw, which hasn't come to you yet, but will soon. That's gonna be big, really big. I don't remember exactly.
But, so what I'm getting at here is each one of these parcels going to have their own access road? Because UDOT required that for them in order to build something that big right there?
Well, the highway's getting widened, so, no. The answer is no. They are allowed to access directly onto the highway. Those parcels are. And the reason that they did it for Archway is the grade change. There's a big grade change between the highway and the Archway in that location. And it wouldn't preclude, you know, a couple property owners getting together and saying, you know, we want to just have one access point onto the highway and have a road that serves our units if there's room for that. There are a lot of advantages to that because you're decreasing the turning movements, the number of different turning movements and access points along the highway.
Is there a timeline for the widening of the road?
Yeah, it's starting construction this winter, maybe? Yeah. Through all next year. Yeah. And they're starting to do some utility work, which is the first stage. They have to move a bunch of utilities before they can widen the highway. So that work will start fairly soon. So where do you want to go with the commercial stuff? Does somebody want to summarize it for me?
I think we need to figure out exact square footage, but that might be another good question for council tomorrow, because ultimately that would be something that they might have a totally different opinion on, so it might as well come from them. But just the idea, small commercial, retail, or what have you space, the idea being similar to somewhere on Main Street currently, or in any of our little smaller shopping centers over by Village Market, or the one that's over by the Hampton. Just kind of that idea where that's gonna be space that will be available for something.
So minimize the project square footage down to 40.
Yeah.
40,000.
Yes.
And then they can earn back an additional 20,000 square foot or an additional story if on-site commercial or on or off-site affordable housing is given, made, built, whatever you want
Yeah.
to do.
On-site commercial or on or off-site.
Site
housing.
affordable.
Do we want a minimum of that, what that square footage looks like in order to get the extra story or the extra
Yes.
60,000 square
Yeah.
feet?
Yeah, and that's one thing I don't know. My vision is something about the size of crystals.
But do we want,
So, square footage, 37 by 40 box
Mhm.
is about 1,500 square feet.
Right. So,
well, I'm not sure that allowing them to put in, allowing an extra story in 60,000 square feet, I think that that's too much to grant for a 1,500 square foot retail space in a hotel.
okay.
I think, they could actually do a whole separate building that's commercial on many of these sites because they're big.
Yeah.
So that was part of my thought.
So maybe we do tie it to one or the other. I mean, we do have height tied to housing, and we do have that extra 20,000 tied to
Commercial?
commercial.
I don't know.
Well, we wouldn't count, so if they had commercial above and beyond like 5%.
Yeah.
Which is kind of normal for hotels and motels, that they could qualify, I guess, if they have a certain amount, they could qualify for additional square footage or the additional building height, but we need to define
What
what that minimal amount is. And I think it needs to be more than just one retail commercial space.
Okay. And that brings us back to, are things going to be viable out there?
Right.
So,
I mean, is one-to-one, could we say for every square foot of, I mean, it's certainly simple. Every square foot of commercial space you provide, you can get up to 20,000 square feet more of overnight accommodations.
so if they build a 20,000 square foot commercial something, they could earn 20,000 square foot of overnight accommodation space.
Which would make the overall project 80,000, including that.
No,
Right.
'cause we're starting at 40, right?
Yeah, it would though, because you could have
40,
20
60.
commercial, 20 more OA, which would be 80
And then 20,
total.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But not
Exactly.
80,000 of new OA, would be 60,000.
Right.
Okay.
But we'd get that big hunk of commercial,
Yeah,
which I think
I mean,
would be
that
good.
seems, it's simple, seems
I agree.
defensible
Okay.
too.
One to one?
That's an
That's a pretty,
approach.
that's a big get, that's a lot
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, It is.
I mean, really trying to, I mean, I think that will actually incentivize
Okay.
new
because
commercial space.
an extra 20,000 is huge. An extra 20,000 is bigger than the Bowen Motel, which is scary.
In this zone.
But, right,
Yeah, it's
in
in
the
a
RC
different
zone.
zone.
Yeah.
In the
I
RC,
mean, yeah.
right. Yeah,
And
okay.
we'd still have the 20,000 square foot maximum building size.
Which we may or may not keep in.
I don't know. That's, right now, that's the way it's drafted,
Right,
but
okay. Okay, everybody okay with that idea? Taking it down to 40 and then doing a 1-to-1 ratio of extra space for commercial or affordable housing?
we can do that.
Okay,
And then it's like, oh, look at this big project, oh, look at this portion, that will be new commercial space for people, cool. Or, oh, look, they're going 3 stories, that means that's
That they provided.
housing.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that it seems silly, but the ability to point at a project in the works and actually articulate that to the community, I think it's very clear based on what we've put in,
Yeah.
which is gonna be really good.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on, what stops them from just creating a really big gift shop in their hotel with a lot of floor space?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Well, I think we, we may want to define the types of commercial uses that qualify.
And
My
those,
earlier kind of,
and-
let's narrow that to what
and
we
that's the
actually want.
question, are we gonna
Convenience store and
do,
a reservation just don't cut it, but I think there would be incentive to
They-
gain more monetary value
yeah, they would
by
want to make
having
money.
Rental
Yeah,
spaces.
a rental space?
Yeah.
And the list for RC, the permitted uses in RC are already there.
Mhm.
If we want to add or subtract from those things, we need to make a note of that.
My
Because
favorite, oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so in RC, we can have a bar, we can have a personal services, I don't know what that is. We could have
Barbershops.
eating establishments, gasoline service station, general retail, office, business, or professional. So it's pretty wide open. We could have outfitters and guide services there.
Which is not necessarily a bad idea and how it's associated with a hotel.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, a lot of us are like, oh, just another gift shop in the hotel, but I don't think we could define a way to not get that kind of souvenir shop
Yeah.
and to allow other small retail. I don't think we
Right.
can distinguish those.
It's going to be,
code-wise.
yeah, it's
Right.
pretty hard
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Like, how do you get like an Indigo Alley but not a something else?
Yeah.
I don't think you can
You can't.
do that. No.
So maybe we need to take a look at the permitted uses are already in the RC, and if we want to make any changes to that, we can bring that up. But right now, those are the permitted uses, and if we can find a way to make them better, that's great.
I actually feel quite much better about
Okay.
this.
And then as far as the Moab bike plan goes, what are we gonna do about the sidewalk on the west side of the highway? For new development on the west side of the highway?
They were gonna make another side there. They were
Yeah,
gonna-
they're in the widening
gonna widen it, but they're
project.
also gonna put, they're gonna put a sidewalk on that other side.
Separated,
Yeah.
separated pedestrian. Yeah.
Which makes no sense to me at all, because it makes sense, but for me, who rides up almost every day, it's like, just use the one on that side.
Yeah, but they have to get out of their hotel and cross the highway, and I've seen people do it to get over there.
It's pretty dangerous.
It is
I've seen
dangerous.
kids do it. Like, I've seen kids staying at these hotels, going swimming in the river, and then coming back in their swimsuits and walking down the highway, and it's really scary.
Yeah. So Nora, I am of the opinion that this is not ready. And I don't know where city council stands on this, but I'm hoping that they can put their 2 cents worth in their
Provide
next
some
meeting.
direction, yeah.
And then Jeanette and I will
Finalize
be
it.
free of it.
Well, one more meeting. We would like a recommendation from you
Right,
to them, hopefully the first week in December.
okay.
And we'd have to, the city council is meeting on December 10th. That's the only meeting date we managed to get in December. I mean, it would be great if they could have another one too. And they may be willing to have one the first week of January. I don't know. But we definitely want to get something adopted.
So if they meet on the 10th, we could meet on the 12th. Do you want to meet before or after they meet?
My preference would be before, but that may be,
So that would be the 5th, that would be 4 days after this Thanksgiving week,
yes,
which,
means next week will be.
right, which to me doesn't seem,
But there are, I agree with Allison, there are a lot of things that I think will be ironed out tomorrow.
Yeah, I
and
think so too.
We're gonna be able to have something very, very soon, but there's big enough holes that,
Let's make the decision tomorrow on when the meetings might be.
okay. So is everybody available on both the 5th and the 12th?
I will not be here on the 12th, but I will be here on the 5th.
I will be here both. Or could do a
Or
different
the
day.
19th.
We could do.
Or a different day.
We could do
We could do a
earlier the
different day.
first, we could do the 4th. A
I
Wednesday.
don't think we want to push it any earlier, though,
I won't be here on Wednesday the
No.
4th.
for Nora's sake,
Yeah.
because she'd like to have some turkey.
Yeah, and my birthday's next week too, so
Oh,
it's kind of that.
What about the 19th?
I'll be gone. I
So-
think we're gonna be running into a lot of absences
Yeah.
come that time.
That's why the council could only land on December 10th.
I truly think we should meet before the 10th, but
I don't,
just to be able to recommend if
Right,
there's something
so-
better.
I don't see the urgency.
I understand.
So I don't know that us making a proposal before or near the 10th should really make much of a difference if we could make it in January and be more thoughtful and take a deep breath and say, yeah, this looks good, or no. I don't think that those 3 weeks between the 10th and the new year are gonna make much difference to anybody. But it will give us time for you to enjoy your turkey and your birthday, and for city council to put in their 2 cents worth, both in your meeting and possibly on the 10th, where they have the public meeting, and then we can go back to work. So for me, I don't see the urgency in forcing us to have a meeting over things that we're not quite sure are gonna be ready before the new year.
Well, let's not decide today.
Right.
Let's see how tomorrow goes.
Okay.
And then I will communicate with all of you and talk to Carly and to Joel and to the mayor and see where we end up.
Okay.
Final thought, I agree. I think if there truly are good faith actors at the state legislature who are waiting for us to do something good, us not meeting that end of year deadline, if they truly had any intent to see what we were doing before they smacked us down at the legislature, I don't think that's gonna make a difference. If they,
You know, legislature starts with
if we are so clearly
middle of
working on it
January.
and so clear, very
Right.
close.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's really the legislative session, that's when we have to,
Yes.
so January 27th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have a little wiggle room.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, Allison, for sure. And that would be easier for me,
Right.
quite frankly. But-
That said, I'm not totally opposed to still having an extra meeting before the 10th, not necessarily to recommend something, but so we can
Just to
have
work on
a
a little more.
chance to circle up again after you talk to council tomorrow. That might be useful.
So
I
just a
don't know.
workshop.
Like a workshop or,
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe it's that first week in
That fifth.
December.
5th, that'd be all right. Just because we are going to be short 2 very experienced planning commission members after December as well.
And if any of you know people who want to apply, encourage them.
And we want to get their, like, burn it all down, final thoughts one last time, so.
If we do have a workshop on the 5th, can I suggest we have it at 6 and not 5?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay, I've got my work cut out for me.
Thank you, Nora.
But I hear what you're saying totally, and I agree. I mean, once you finally put it down on paper, it's like,
Yeah.
so.
So, any future agenda items for just the regular planning commission for us, Nora?
Yeah, I mean, I went over last time a little bit about,
Right.
about future agenda items. There's another plat, another minor plat. The Henry Shaw, as I mentioned, will be coming before the planning commission relatively soon. They still just had a few engineering things they had to do. So, then there are a couple other things in the works out there.
Okay.
There's the Four Corners Behavioral Health Building, and they will be requesting a parking exception, so
Okay.
will be coming out very soon.
Okay.
Real quick, and this is something I've been out of town all week and a little scattered. The issues with light at night from the Worldmark construction site to adjacent property owners, has that made its way to you or
Yes.
any of the other staff?
It has.
And
it's
what
out,
is happening? Because that is totally crazy and unacceptable and looks so
Right.
terrible on the city.
it's also hours of construction is the issue,
Yeah.
really, right? Our building official, and so Barry and Mona are working with them to make sure that, there may be some mornings when they have to do a pour early in the morning, but by and large, that they not have construction after 10 and before 6 or 7.
I think it's 7.
Yeah, I think it's 7. So we are working with them. We know it's an issue. And we've gotten lots of input on that.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Have we looked at, within residential zones in the city, can we change those construction hours or the noise? So they're different than the noise ordinance hours?
Certainly, the council could change the code to do that. It's not really on the plate right now, but it might be something that yeah, we want to look at. I know with the highway construction, there is very specific language about when work can be done, and the hours are much more limited when it's close to residential uses. So, you know, it may be something that we want to look at in the future. It's not on anybody's plate right now, but it's not a bad idea to reevaluate that.
And just being the squeaky wheel, night skies is out there. I just wish they were darker.
I understand.
So
That's going to take some time.
I know, but
Yeah.
I just wish they'd turn them off. Not that they would change their lighting, not that they would adjust their light bulbs, just turn them off when you're not in business. That's all. So.
I understand.
It's definitely a little darker now that it's slowed down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
definitely darker, yeah.
Yeah, I was driving around last week, and it's not bad right now.
Yeah, it is.
All relative.
It is all
I
relative.
just look at the lights on the cliffs all the time, and it's better.
Okay, thank you, Nora. All right, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 7:42 PM. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So as a
Oh,
total
you finished
aside,
mine.
you ladies might be interested to learn that on December 3rd, in the rotunda of the Capitol